What is our quorum number?
5.
5? We're good.
Yep.
There, and do you guys wanna quickly share names and for the record and?
Yeah, Merrick, Gillies, here tonight with Farm Team. Benedict.
How do you say your last name?
Benedict. Like
Okay,
the egg,
yeah,
or the
gotcha.
American trader, either one.
Alright, and timekeeper and minute taker,
Why don't we go around the room and introduce
Oh,
ourselves?
that makes sense, yeah.
Should be right.
I'm right, Preston.
Brad Elliott.
Melissa Williver.
Jim Cochran, Sam Pratt. Ian.
Ian Stokes,
Yeah, Stokes.
and Chase Rosenberg.
Sorry.
Thanks. Alright, so timekeeper, and minute taker.
I'll do.
Timekeeper,
I can do that.
okay,
I already started doing that.
Minute taker?
I can do it.
Okay.
I'll need the spelling of all of your 3 names, so. I can catch up with you later, or you can do them. Yeah, that's a great
Merrick
thing.
is-
alright, approving November minutes. Does someone wanna make or any additions or comments on?
Those were minutes.
Thank you.
Right, and I thought really good,
Yeah, thanks, Brad.
especially, there's the summary of what Tyler Mathieu was saying, especially
Oh,
his
yeah.
answers to questions that were posed. So I sort of see those minutes as a point of reference if we want to go back and remind ourselves what he was saying, top than anything else in the minutes.
Any additions or changes?
I'll make a motion, we accept them.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch who made the motion.
I did.
You didn't?
I did.
It's hard to see the line here, of people, I wasn't sure if this.
So Chase and I put a minute, put an agenda together, is it agreeable? No changes.
I was, it'll come out, never mind.
Alright, 3 RCC, RTC reports. RCC,
Yeah, so the only thing that's might be relevant to ACFC is last meeting, we discussed a potential UVM climate study in Richmond. There's a climatology and natural hazards class, and they're considering doing it in Richmond, which would be all of Richmond, but it might end up benefiting the forest committee and some of what we learned about what's in there. So that in short would be stuff like hazard assessment, mass wasting and fluvial erosion, hazard mitigation of water resources, and then forest management to improve resilience, so like stuff like preventing fragmentation, riparian buffer restoration, and invasive species management. So that's the only thing that we talked about that might apply to ACF, but it's a good thing to be aware of. We're moving forward with trying to coordinate with them. And the class would be next fall, so it's a ways off, but the professor is trying to plan whether or not it makes sense to do it in Richmond. So that's all I got.
This is the UVM group that recently, maybe last year, did a report for Underhill.
Yes, they did, yeah, they
So
did.
that's if you want to know what they do or the general format, I guess, just go that Underhill study is related.
Yeah, for sure. And if you are interested in looking at that study, if you look at the last RCC meeting attachments, there are some attachments with that study attached. So you can look to see what information they provided for Underhill.
In our last trails meeting, the only real relevant thing that we talked about was, I mentioned that the questions had come up in our committee about what a relationship with RMT might look like. And we talked about whether Richmond Trails would be okay with RMT being the main liaison, and folks confirmed that that was a relationship that Richmond Trails felt comfortable with. And we also talked and shared, we had a generally good experience partnering with RMT thus far. So they were in support of the town forest committee teaming up with RMT.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the scope of that relationship? Who would be doing what? And who would-
Yeah, so the way we've done it, and Mike, you can step in and add, and Merrick too, but the way we've talked about shared maintenance is, and it would, I guess, before I say that, RMT has said they're open to crafting the relationship however it would work for us, but the way we've done it is, they've come to us and said, we have volunteers, is there a project that needs attention? And we've talked about that project over a meeting, and then they've worked with us to set a date and identify who's, like, the scope of the project, and then gone and done it. And we've also co-coordinated on general work days a bunch, because they have a really good outreach arm. And I would say they have the main outreach arm for trail work in Richmond. And I think a lot of the public, my perception is a lot of the public doesn't differentiate between the different trail groups. They think, oh, if I want to help out with Richmond Trails, RMT is who is the sort of organizing body. And so they have, it's been easy to work with, and they've been able to do the PR.
If I could just make another comment, I remember from Trails Committee days that we would call for volunteers for trail work. Construction, I think, as well as maintenance, and those calls for volunteers would go out from Quorum, so that, like that, because it has such penetration through the town, that would reach very broad spectrum of, you know, the portion of the town, and people would show up, and you know, it was a great way to get things done. So I'm just wanting to be clear that all volunteers are welcome, that this wouldn't be some exclusive relationship with Richmond Mountain Trails.
No, yeah, and I think Front Porch Forum would still probably be the leading message board. And yeah, nothing exclusive, just that they put energy into developing a nice outreach network and would lend that network to helping get stuff done. And fundraising as well, like it's been a good shared relationship.
I think at the Trails Committee meeting, we also discussed, after you were on the Trails Committee and before most of these members were on the Andrews Committee, we've had the same conversation, and so probably 4 or 5 years ago, Richmond Trails Committee had the same conversation about having, Richmond Mountain Trails do their trail maintenance on the Andrews parcel, and so that conversation has already happened, so we basically just reiterated it.
More about RMT and Andrews in due course.
Yeah, we've got there,
Others on the agenda.
yeah.
Anyone want more discussion with Chase or? move along
Is this
here?
on the agenda for?
Yeah, let's wait for Merrick, because. Alright. And then any public comment? From any of the first items? Alright. Should we move ahead with Brandon?
Oh, Jeanette, raised time. Yeah, we don't see it, I see it on my Screw.
I think it's just, is it your knife? Is that your cursor?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's my mouse, sorry, apologies. Like I said.
Yeah, I was like, it doesn't look yellow.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Brandon, do you wanna jump in?
Sure, yes, so. I looked at what Ethan had left in his files, he had left me some notes about what he had done, what needs to be done. So looking at the Andrews Community Forest, he had finished up all the harvesting that was prescribed in the management plan. He had some other harvesting that was kind of optional, so that's something, you know, we could talk about and explore a little bit. And basic controls done in 2023. And then the follow-up items that I'm not really sure because they were in the management plan, but he had notes on them, were exploring hunting, monitoring for deer, monitoring for invasives, boundary line maintenance, apple tree release and brush hogging. So I guess from there, my big question is, my communications with Brad. I understand you're redoing the management plan and you're interested in exploring the forest management plan, either updating it or doing something like that, is that correct? More or less.
Yeah.
So, from my
Especially,
perspective,
just at least get the recognition of what the work that's been done. And then what's your next steps gonna be?
yeah,
The optional or some of those.
yeah. So from my perspective, usually when foresters write management plans are for a certain time frame. It could be 10, 15, 20 years. Seems like here in Vermont, 10 years is kind of the common one, because that's what the current use kind of standards are, so it seems like everyone kind of follows that. So Ethan's management plan that he had written was from 2019 to 2029. So I could write a new management plan for you guys, if you wanted that, to just get on the same cycle as your overall management plan. I don't know how long that theoretically will stand for. I think the easier option though would be for me to write an amendment to the plan that's already been written. And just kind of, write an amendment that would kind of, like Brad just said, kind of update what's already been done. And potentially also explore those other harvests that Ethan had recommended but didn't necessarily prescribe. I think that would probably be the easiest option. So I guess take your thoughts at this point, what you prefer and what you want to do.
On that list that he made, are there, the last. What do we figure, 7 years, no, 6 years. Do you see anything leaking to the fore that maybe we ought to tackle first, off the top of your head? I know you
Yeah,
have
the big-
much of a chance.
The big one would be controlling invasives.
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of the biggest threat to like ecological integrity. Some type of work was done in 2023, and I'm sure you guys know better than I do what was done. But apparently, where is it? Bob, I'll say his name wrong, Hyams?
Iser. Iser.
Yeah, I got Bob Hyams, but he
Is it
could,
the neighbor that mows?
I have no idea. If Ethan didn't write it down, then I don't know.
Good
Are you
old Bob.
talking about invasives control?
Yeah,
That Bob Hines did?
yeah, that's what
It
it
could
is.
be from the, through the power line, and sprayed the power line in
Okay.
2020.
Okay, yeah, so there's whole areas south of the power lines were sprayed by Bob Hyams, funded by Habitat Stand. So anyway, I guess my overall point is, I think that would, that kind of jumped out to me. He said the invasives were pretty bad, kind of along the southern boundary of the community forest, so that's something I'd probably explore. Redoing that work, it's generally pretty good to do that invasive control work, like kind of 3 years in a row. That first year, you try to get like all the, the major like seed sources. Then that next year, inevitably something was kind of missed and there's gonna be some seed coming in. And then that third year, kind of deal with it again. And then after that, it's kind of hopefully easy to, have volunteers maybe go in and mechanically remove them and just try to like maintain that control of the invasives. So I think it'd be worth exploring doing that again this year and next year. I haven't walked the property yet, so that's something I probably want to do ahead of time to get like an idea of the scope of the invasives. That's what really jumped out to me. The second that jumped out was he did prescribe some more harvesting that wasn't, he didn't prescribe, he recommended some other harvesting be done, so that is another potential thing that kind of jumped out at me to just follow through with what he had written. Really, that's it though. I mean, other than that, I would probably say I would let this management plan kind of play out until 2029. The only other things he wrote down that I think are also worth mentioning is, sounds like the deer browse sounds really heavy on the forests. And he had said there was some talk about allowing hunting on Andrews Community Forest. I don't know,
It's already,
It's
it is allowed, all right. Great, so that, and then, yeah, I got nothing else, I guess, just, I would really focus on invasives and potentially following through with that harvesting.
we had talked with Andrea Shortsleeve
Mhm.
here on a wildlife
Yeah.
stewardship plan, and she was pretty strong at, saying, well, we should try to promote hunting. But we didn't really have any great, grand ideas on how to do it. So she was saying, try to get people in the antler this season,
Yeah,
the crossbows and.
Looking at parking, cars parked, there was a lot of
Yes.
activity
great.
on the
Awesome.
property.
So it's,
Yeah.
Are the trails closed down during the hunting season?
No,
No?
Used less, but not closed.
Got it.
Is there any way to find out how many deer were taken this season, this year? They registered, but not necessarily whether, was taken.
Right.
I think just allowing hunting on the community forest is great to begin with.
we were kicking around the idea of more of a demonstration project and making it exclosure
Mhm.
to keep deer out of a certain area, just to demonstrate how much they browse, just by
Yeah.
putting some fence up. I know some of the Ethan's cuts were designed to keep the deer out too, so
Yeah,
small stuff could grow.
that's a great idea. One of there was a federal grant a while ago that was doing that as a demonstration, like, I think it was just like a 20 by 20, like fenced in area,
Yeah,
just to show long-term what deer browse does. So I think that's a great idea.
I saw one up on Providence Island, it's dramatic.
Yeah. Well, people don't think about it.
No.
It's just like they like Bambi and
Yeah.
there's no way Bambi's hurting my forest.
Right. Well, you hunt, maybe you can come down.
I don't hunt,
Oh, I thought you did.
but I eat venison.
That's
It's
right.
wrong.
Okay. Great.
Do you have any opinions on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you go.
I was just gonna say, if you make a date to walk the forest, would you let one of the co-chairs know, and a group of us might be happy to join you?
Yeah,
That's exactly.
yeah, if someone wants to maybe email me, I've been communicating with Brad, so I can email Brad, but
Mm.
I'll just communicate with whoever and plan to go out maybe in like February or March or something.
That'd be great.
Then we could plan
We'd love to tag along.
Yeah.
Just chit chat. And-
well, it'd be good too to get your guys' perspective too. You guys know the forest and this will be my first time walking there, so that'd be good. So I'll plan for February or March to do a walkthrough.
That'd be great.
So you wanted to?
Yeah, I had a question. I'm curious if you had opinions on trying to do deer type exposures just with down trees. Is that something that's effective or not really worth considering?
Yeah, so people do that, like specifically when harvests are done a lot of times, like they'll cut the top branches off. So they're just taking the stems out and all that branchy nonsense is left in the woods, and we'll try to use that to try to kind of deter deer. And I've heard like various ways of doing it. You can just kind of leave it all over the place. I think that's what Ethan likes doing. I've also heard people trying to make like almost like fences with they call it slash, like slash walls to try to like make areas. So I've heard kind of mixed results. Kind of seems like almost comes down to what the local deer population, how hungry they are, how willing they are to like work through that slash. But it's an option and it's been done and it's done pretty regularly. I don't think it's a bad idea at all.
Okay, and my other question is about the additional harvesting. Is that just sort of throughout or in a specific area? Is that making another clearing, or are there more specifics about what that would entail?
Yeah, so when foresters manage areas, they divide up the ground into something we call stands, and it's just
Yeah.
like different, kind of groupings of trees you can kind of manage similarly. So Ethan had harvested in stands 3, 4, and 6. But in stands 1 and 2, he said there was some additional, harvesting that could be done. I think that's more in the kind of the southern portion of the property below the power line, if I remember correctly. Okay, so stand 1 is kind of the whole southern boundary, and stand 2 is kind of the whole western half almost. So he had just, recommended some additional harvesting. It would make some openings, but not very big ones.
Okay, so not patch cuts, just a few trees here and then you can.
Yeah, well, I can tell you right now, actually, but do that real quick, sorry. So in stand 1, which is that southern boundary, he did call for some patches up to 2 acres. And then removing some 4 trees in between those. And that was just to try to get some new regenerations. I think that area is kind of all, older field pine that isn't like. Not really, ecologically what should be growing there, and it's also not really valuable in terms of like. Well, anything in economics or ecological value. So I think that was the plan with the patch cuts to try to just do something new, kind of almost start over there. And then in stand 2, I guess the regeneration is pretty well established, like the seedlings and saplings, so he was calling for cutting some of the, in patches, cutting some of the overstory trees, but not, consistently across the entire, stands.
Okay, cool.
Question, the reducing of apple trees,
Yes.
what does that entail?
So, I don't know where they are, because it wasn't in the plan, but there's apparently some apple trees somewhere on the property. And a lot of times those are old, like pasture apple trees that were, left there from, agricultural, history. And they don't grow very tall, so when you have forest growing, they tend to crowd over the apple trees, so just pretty much cutting around those apple trees to remove those overstory trees to give the apples more light. And that's really just to keep apple trees on the landscape, basically for wildlife mass sources.
How often does it need to be repeated?
That's a great question.
Or is it ideally repeated?
I think it's, I guess it depends where the apple trees are, but it's, you want them to have constant light, really. So it'd be, once something is competing with it, you would kind of reevaluate constantly and say, all right, this pine tree's finally now competing with these apple trees, let's cut it down.
You'd almost think that once you got it cleared, the browsers would keep it cleared.
Certainly a potential, with how many deer there probably are, it's a potential.
Even the old apple trees that don't produce apples anymore, are they still worth releasing, or?
That's a great question, I actually don't know the answer to that. I guess it's an interesting question. If you gave them more light, would they start producing apples because they'd have more resources, or is it just, are they too far gone past the point where they're not gonna react to that release? I don't know. Let's choose one and not do anything, let's do, cut another one and see if they react.
Yeah.
I did see there's a workshop coming up, and Jeff Forward's putting something together in March about pruning and releasing. So maybe pruning too.
Great,
We're terrible with our perennials, but they would theoretically be better if.
Yeah.
They got off our bunch of pruning.
Thanks.
I've been trying that with one apple tree that I found when I moved to my house, and it hasn't returned to producing fruit yet. Yeah.
No? All right.
No, but I was wondering if it would.
Like, pick up on a couple of things, which have already risen, the one is that we'd be very pleased to be able to, show you around if that would be helpful.
Yeah. Definitely.
You mentioned that, probably not as familiar with the Andrews Forest as you'd like to be, so, and I guess Brad is kind of your contact person, so depending on your schedule, let's set something up, either, one big one or several smaller visits to, to get familiar with the forest, and I know that Ethan Tapham did some really thorough mapping, and I think there were other surveys.
Oh,
of the
yeah, I have-
forest, so you have those.
I have some of those bets.
Okay, the second thing, you mentioned you're aware that we're revising the management plan, and actually, later in our agenda, we've got, I put on a topic to, an agenda topic to assign responsibility for different sections of the management plan, which is in draft form.
Mhm.
And I actually assigned you to two pieces of it.
To me? What are my two pieces?
Well, and maybe there are three parts. I mean, there is a forestry management plan, which is an appendix to the management, to the main management plan, the central management plan, which is long and detailed. Then within the management plan itself, there's one section that's sort of descriptive about the forest and, what you would find there. And then in a subsequent section, the management action, management objectives and management tasks action plan. So if you're willing to take a look at those in the current draft, depending on how we address that later, if it comes up in the agenda, we'll be trying to assign different responsibility. I don't know if you'll be able to stay that long. We're scheduled to pick that up at just after 7 p.m. But otherwise, maybe we could be in contact about that, and I have I could easily send you the current draft of the management plan and any other things that would be helpful.
Happy to take that on. It's no problem. I guess I'm interested, what is the timeline that you want that done in?
Sorry, my hearing is really
What?
about the timeline, yeah. Ideally, we'll address that later in our agenda, but ideally, our next meeting is at the end of January. So at least a preliminary look at the material by then would be really good.
Okay.
I think it's January 28th is our next meeting. It's always the fourth Monday.
Okay.
So yeah, if we could be in contact about that, like, again, I'm sure you're busy. Do let us know what your time frame would be.
Yeah, I could definitely do something preliminary and take a look at it and have something on paper, but I don't think it would be a final draft of anything. 'Cause I'm writing a management plan right now for Wakefield town, and that due date is, I don't know why I looked at my watch, I have the date on it. January 16th, so I'm trying to finish that, but right after that, I could then kind of pick this up and start looking at that. So email me, please.
Yeah.
I don't want to be rude, but I am not gonna stay for that portion. I started my day at like 7 o'clock today and I haven't eaten dinner yet, so please excuse me on that front.
We have fudge.
I had some fudge, it was very good, but
It's still
didn't
done.
satisfy.
People showing up here to get an assignment.
Right,
yeah.
I didn't even sign up, I didn't even show up yet, I already had assignments. What else was I gonna say about that? Yeah, so just please email me, those things again, and the draft, and, I'll be happy to do that, yeah.
And you also can say that.
What's the fun in that, though?
Just so you know.
Yeah, no, what's the fun in that?
I have one question. What's the ideal role for us and like way that we communicate with you? Like, what do you imagine as you being the county forester for our town forest? Aside from having this 10-year plan, what's the ideal like type of communication and like amount of communication and method of communication between you and the towns?
Well, I always get back via email, so email's great, but in terms of like how much, it's. One of the fun things about my role is I get to work with towns and try to help them, so. If there's something that needs to be done and I have the time to do it, I'm happy to do it. I don't imagine that's gonna be all the time, but like, right now you guys are updating your management plan and. You might need an amendment, so now is the time for me to come in and do some help, and then I realistically anticipate there probably won't be anything after that for a little while, but then, you know, the harvesting that. You know, theoretically might be scheduled will come up and then. We'll talk again and we'll make that happen, so I think it's periodic is, I guess, what I'm picturing in my head.
Yeah, okay.
Alright, so, we'll be in contact then with the management plan, and in my understanding. I'm reading the room, and I feel like I should probably try to come up with an amendment to the forestry plan.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that.
We'll be realistic about that timeline, that will probably be more in the spring that I have time for that, to actually. Do that portion, to have, like I said, Wastefield, we're doing a management plan. And then actually right after that, I'm also doing one for Duxbury, I don't know how to say that, the name of that time, I assume it's Duxbury. So realistically, I think the spring I'd be able to look at an amendment and get that written up, is that fine?
I have a question, and
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm late, I have my daughter at the doctor and it went way too long, I'm trying to figure out, because we had a 10-year forestry plan.
Yep.
Why are we amending it now? I thought that would be good until 2028.
Yeah, so you're very much correct, it's good until 2029. The only reason I'm here talking about it is, I was invited, but, it seems that from my perspective, you guys are rewriting the management plan for the overall forest, so it's a good time to re-examine it. And also Ethan had included some management that wasn't prescribed, like with a capital P, but he recommended it, so. I'm just going to, I guess, write up an amendment saying, hey, it's time to do this recommendation.
Okay, yeah, I think there was some invasive species work and some other things, but in terms of scheduled timber sales, I don't think we had any for a while, is that
Yeah,
right?
so you didn't have anything, again, prescribed, everything that was prescribed was completed in 2021. He had recommended in 2 more stands, potential harvests. So, you know, that's what the town wants, and I'm happy to write up an amendment to make those harvests happen.
And those harvests would have been before 2029?
Yes. He recommended they happen in 2021, actually,
We chose not to continue the harvest in the next season on the eastern portion of the property.
Yeah, and everything being targeted in 2021 in part was because of a big oak mass here, I think.
Mhm.
That he was also expecting, so I don't know how critical time-wise it is to do it now. So I don't feel like we should feel like it was overdue, he was just trying to capture this rare actually more than oak, there are a couple of species that was a mass here, he's like, ooh, we're gonna harvest this year.
that's really, yeah, I didn't come across that, it's certainly a potential. In stand, one of the stands, he had mentioned that there was some established regeneration that would be good to, I think stand 2. There was some established regeneration on the ground that would be good to release now. And give it light before it starts to become suppressed.
So you'll write those as recommendations in your amendment, is that the idea?
So I mean, so I'm new to the whole, you know. World of town forests and select boards and everything. He had written those again as recommendations, so if I wrote an amendment, that would be my prescription would be basically what he had written. And I guess it would probably go to the select board and be approved, is that my understanding, probably correct? So it would officially amend the forest management plan, and those would become prescriptions at that point. To actually follow through,
So then do we actually want those amendments then, or do we?
that's a great conversation for you guys to have.
Yeah, sorry.
And I don't necessarily have to be here for that. You guys can totally decide if that's what you want to follow through on, and I'm here to make that happen if that's what you're interested in.
Well, that's a good transition time. Next agenda topic. Anyway, just on time and.
Okay,
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
very good.
Great meeting.
Bon
Yep.
appetit.
So let me know then, just what you guys decide then.
Yeah.
Either way, I'll help you with the management plan halfway, and just let me know if an amendment is, something I should put on my docket.
Great.
Right, Have a good night, all.
All right.
Yeah, you too. Sure. Bye. You guys are welcome to come sit. Up to.
Do people already break into the fun?
Yeah, we say that's all.
Please have
Yeah.
some.
Is it gluten free by any chance?
It is, yeah, it's just cream, butter, walnuts and maple syrup.
There's butter in there, I better have that.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah.
Alright, so Merrick and Mike, I guess, yeah, you haven't met with this iteration of the ACF committee. But we're gaming out what a relationship with RMT could look like. And one of the questions that's come up as we're thinking about trails is how would the building get funded and how would maintenance, regular maintenance happen? And so I know the conversation has been, you all are a funding engine that's been able to, that receives most of the Richmond Trails funding and raises a bunch of money. And also have a good maintenance wing at this point, so looking at what that relationship might look like.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, because I think a lot of people aren't aware, all of the funding for new trail construction in the dry range was from grants, it's not from, and it's in donations, but our membership is for maintenance on existing Richmond trails, essentially.
I'm sorry, can you back up again?
Yeah, you might explain like the basic membership
I didn't-
structure.
And
Sure.
I'm catching up with that for this. So, yeah, maybe back up a little bit.
So, Richmond Mountain,
Could you back
yeah,
real quick?
so we're from Richmond Mountain Trails.
Okay, and what is your position there? What do you do there? Like, are you a volunteer or?
I'm on the board
You're on, okay,
and I'm a volunteer
okay,
and I'm on Richmond Trails Committee as well.
okay,
I'm also on the board. We have 6 board members.
and are you on the Richmond Trail?
I'm not.
Okay.
And Mike, are you a former Andrews
I'm not.
board member?
Where you were?
Okay,
And is Richmond Mountain Trails, 501c3 nonprofit?
Yes.
And so when you're seeing grant funding, so you guys have been applying for grants and how's that?
Yeah, we're multi-purpose trails club under the VINBA umbrella, or through the fiscal sponsor that we get 501c3 status through. And
But there's a relationship with Vermont Mountain Bike Association, is it the VIMBA?
yes,
So that membership of Richmond Mountain Trails is actually through the non-profit status of VIMBA rather than through Richmond Mountain Trails itself, or could you explain that relationship between the two?
yeah, it's really probably not germane at all for anything going on with Andrews Town Forest, but people can join Vermont Mountain Bike Association and they choose a chapter, so there are chapters throughout the state, in different areas of the state, and we are the, local representation. And we work with all trail users, so we have roomed in the winter for snowshoeing, walking, backbiking, walking, nature watching, running, biking in the summer. We've worked on through our volunteers and through volunteer days. A lot of the different trails through town. I most recently with Great Western on the Johnny Brook Trail to put a third level of the board to walk on, it keeps sinking in. But to make that more easily travelable.
So, so VMBA is a 501c, not the Richmond.
We are,
Yeah, we are.
we're tax exempt.
You're also a 501c.
But not a separate one, you're a chapter of the other one.
Okay, just trying to make sure.
and the way membership works is that if you join. Half of the membership money, so I think it was $75 this last year, half of the money goes to the state chapter and half comes back to Richmond.
I see.
And so. Richmond Mountain Trails uses that funding that they get from membership to help Richmond Trails.
Yeah, I think sort of
we sort of got into the weeds a little bit, but like the summary being on that, like the town. I think the budget is like $5,000 a year that the Trails Committee gets for trails. We have a lot of trails in town, $5,000 does not cover maintenance, building, sort of anything remote, that's a great source of funding, but like. Can't really provide the full picture, so. Where we've been able to sort of work with that is apply for like private grants for corporations or go through state grants or sort of those sort of systems to try to like get more funding into town, and that's either been, pursuing. New projects or, assisting with existing projects, working with private landowners who wanna do, trails or support recreation access on their properties. And sort of all of in between.
How much money do you have to spend on Richmond in a year?
It varies, we have to go after specific grants for specific projects, so we get membership from each of our members. Gives us like an amount through Bemba, and that sort of determines like our base budget, but it like completely fluctuates, depends on what we're
Like of
working.
all the projects that you did in 2024 or 2023, how much did you spend?
$250,000, around somewhere in there. And that was
In Richmond?
Richmond, Bolton, we represent like the area, so most of that was on a trail project in Bolton that received significant funding. Yeah, and this, I think the project on Andrews Town Forest is very different, so that's sort of what I was trying to say, like, as it was prescribed, or as it's been written in the management plan or been discussed, it's a hand-built trail, multi-use trail. The trail was built in Bolton, was machine-built adaptive trail, much wider. Excavators were involved to make sure the grades were appropriate and to put in drainage work as well as some mountain bike specific features on some of the trails. Very different type of project, and we have experience in everything from literally one volunteer in a rake and shovel building a trail, and to that other level. And so I think oftentimes when people think of trail building, it's like, it's one thing, and it's really like, it's like the driveway all the way to the interstate, when we do everything in between.
All depends.
How many members?
1,000.
Up to 1,000, wow.
Yeah. And then, just like for the driving range project, one in Bolton, we had how many volunteers? I think it's 5,000 volunteer hours and 300 volunteers over 3 summers. Some came for one night. Most came for 4 or 5 a summer, and some would be pretty much everyone from 11-year-old folks to Peter Hawks came when he was 85.
The question, with all these members and all these skills and all this experience, are among you, a professional engineer, planner, or architect who could create a site plan for trails? And I'm reading that out of what the local zoning guy told us we need.
I'm like about as close as you can get to actually not being able to do it for you.
But on which side of the line?
So I did engineering for the previous 5 years, but I don't have a license anymore in the state of Vermont.
He didn't say licensed.
I think
He generally refers to a licensed engineer.
Okay, he said professional there.
Yeah.
I think he did say licensed, and it might have been in his rewrite up that he's.
Yeah, I'm reading the rewrite, but I haven't.
I think we're talking about lots of small elements and very specific items. I think it was more, and when we reached out was like, this committee is the town committee that's doing all this work, making the management plan, designing all the things, and just sort of wanting to come here as an organization that has a lot of people that are involved, and we've been able to sort of work on a variety of projects and have a variety of skills and just sort of offer that assistance and how it might fit in with this committee. And I think it could look a lot of ways, and I think some of the things are on the agenda. I'd love to just clear up maybe tonight, so we could see how we might work together moving forward, and also just some of the things that Chase brought up in the beginning of this meeting. There are a lot of folks, and if we have users in the future on the trails, just sort of having some of the conversations beforehand about like, what it might look for us to be an arm of Andrews to sort of like say, hey, users, trails are closed for X, or hey, users, this might be a good thing to take a look at, or where you can get information and sort of all the things in between. Just because there are a lot of folks, as Chase said, that they don't really fully understand, like, oh, I'm recreating on private land or town land or state land, and folks try to look for information, and we're generally decent at getting that information out to people now, so.
So hypothetically, if, let's say the decision was made to make these trails hiking only. Would RMT still be excited to lend volunteers and go fund them?
I think, so I don't wanna speak, I'm not gonna speak for the whole org, there's people who work with us who would be excited about some aspect of that, but we are a multi-use trail org, so I think. Like, if the entire network did support bikes, I don't know as much support, like, we have other projects we probably wanna focus resources on. But we probably wanna go to the whole board and not just have Mike and I make that unilateral decision.
I just didn't know if you were aware, just in the context of coming, it's great that you're here.
Yeah.
So a vendor for whoever is chosen to build the trails will have to be approved by select board. And the vendor for who is ever chosen to maintain the trails outside of the town trails will have to be approved by select. And I just wanted to make sure I was clear to you guys.
Great, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, and one of the reasons I wanted to come here too is that there are like different relationships that different entities have in this extent, so like. Wouldn't describe us as a vendor, like we coordinate volunteers.
Well-
No, I understand how it might play in, but there are like. One of the local other Venba chapters, Fellowship of the Wheel, like they do most of their work through their membership, they maintain the Heinsberg Town Forest Trails, they maintain other town forests. Some of those towns, like Moss Forest and Jericho, like they get payment for those services for their professional crew. We're not at that scale yet with the crew of that nature, but I think it'd be more along the lines of. Just trying to like, we've done a lot of, or like, I do a lot of contracting and like RFPs for builders and like those connections, and just if we can offer that to sort of help the process, because. Part of the reason that we're here too is that like a lot of our membership lives in town, really excited about the project, excited to be able to use the forest, so. In representing them and their dollars and their, membership in our chapter, we wanna make sure that we're like helping advocate for those projects and sort of providing resources that we have as a board. Where we can.
Yeah, so the reason that the vendors would be approved by the select board is that we're an advisory body. To the select.
And we keep learning that.
Yeah.
In good ways, that we are advisory. So I'm hearing, help us with, you're prepared, or you're interested potentially to help us with, trail design, trail maintenance. I won't use the term marketing, but sort of management of use, that's a better term than
Yeah,
marketing.
marketing's not a good.
Yeah, I
I
didn't-
know you're trying to say, because once the trails are there, and which there already are trails there, if you're not explaining why some shouldn't be used, or others should be used, or the time of year.
Right,
or-
so management of use, or whatever the
Whatever,
proper term is.
yeah, that's really important.
Yep,
Yeah, we are moving towards one system to notify people of trail conditions. That's gonna be used across all groups, so that the public knows to consult. One system, and that system can be embedded in both the Andrews website. And
With the we on that?
as a town, all the, so
Oh,
RMT and Richmond Town Trails and Cochran's.
And I think you mentioned this last meeting, I
Yeah.
can't remember the name of the app.
Yeah, Trail Forks, and it really nicely embeds into other sites, but it's a list of openings and closures that's color coded and really obvious, so users look before they leave home. Can look really quickly, is the Andrews Forest open? Or is the trail that I wanna go on open? And it's a consistent.
Do you know if hunters use that? Or could we encourage them? I know a lot of hunters use comments or something.
I don't know. I don't know that trail closures are a factor for hunters as much.
I don't think it would be,
Right.
because it's different, it's just like access to a property is different than, I think, using a trail, whether or not the trail is open.
I think it's a big deal in the mountain bike community because there's so many landowner relationships that are pending good behavior. That there's a really strong push to behave well and honor trail closures and taking care of trails in a wet place.
But it does appear that, Andrews Community Forest would be new territory for Richmond Mountain Trails in the sense that there are very different types of relationship between the trails and landowners in Richmond. We have Preston Preserve, which is privately owned but conserved with a conservation easement, which authorizes the Trails Committee to be responsible for trails. There is town property like town roads, the Johnny Brook Trail and the old Jericho Road Trail, which is mostly on town class 4 road. So that again, the select board, I guess, has authorized the Trails Committee to be responsible for those class 4 roads and trails on them. Preston Preserve and Cochrane's, of course, is different again, in the sense that Preston Preserve itself has a conservation easement, but the trails there go on to private land. Mike would know about that, and also Cochrane's as well, sort of connect. So anyway, there are different relationships between, presumably if Richmond Mountain Trails gets involved in trail management in any way in those town trails, Andrews Forest would be a new one because a different one because it's town property and it's conserved land, and that would be a new unique relationship. And the mechanism that would have to be approved by the select board and doesn't yet exist, but you know, I think that's why we're
Probably
expressing
similar.
some caution.
Similar to some of the river trail. in the
That's
town.
what I was gonna say, because Overrockers that's town owned.
Right,
And conserved, right?
so River
It's not
Shore
conserved.
Trail, River Shore Trail is sorry, it's a River Shore Trail is about 6 different owners, but
That's right.
one of them is the town.
Right. Exactly. Are you having similar conversations? Are you thinking about having similar conversations with, for example, neighboring lands like VYCC?
Yeah, that's on this agenda,
Right,
so we could get into it now too if you want, but.
it's up to the co-chair.
Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
I jumped the gun, sorry.
Yeah, so and that's one of the main reasons I wanted to come here, so, yeah, the two of the abutting parcels, so VYCC. I've worked with them like the last year or so, they updated their charter a little while ago. To allow bikes as a use, and it reached out to us as a local resource to sort of see how that might interface with their existing network and needs, just because. Same thing, like in terms of people and management, like the same website that manages the trail closures that Chase was just talking about, like lists their area as a parking area, they don't want people parking there currently, and sort of working through some of those things, so. Been in discussions with them about what that might look like, you know, they have a lot of work they're doing right now on their like facilities and their barn project. But they do a lot of trail work, and they're really excited to get involved with local groups because they do like to allow people to recreate on their parcel. And they support that currently, and it's sort of I don't know if anyone's explored back there, there's like lots of demonstration projects that have occurred over the years, but the network itself. Doesn't like completely mesh and integrate as well as it might, and some of the trails like lead to places they might not want people in the future. And then Mapleland Farm as well, the landowners there reached out to us, and we've been working with them regarding trails on their parcel, so that abuts the forest.
Wait, they have trails on there
So we're working with them
for
on,
recreation?
for recreation use, yeah, so we're working with them on that right now.
Where are they?
So they're not open to the public yet, we just started this project with them,
But they're going to be open.
but they will be open to the public.
Where are they?
So there's a initial one that's gonna start from their log landing, down by Route 2. And that will go up towards the Heidelands, and then head on over towards the Bash Trail that connects, over to VYCC, so that's on Ruth and Beth's property there. I'm working with them as well about how that might help with the farm store and how they'd be able to allow vehicles to park there, in the future, for access in that area.
So
For
that's the
access to
north
the
side of
Andrews
Route 2.
community?
Nope, well, access to the trails that they're hoping to have on their property, but they'd also be across the street from Andrews, so.
Okay, cause that kind of changes things a little bit in my perspective.
Sure.
'Cause, like, our parking is kind of a natural cap that we've kind of planned around and thought about, so. I don't see people differentiate how much parking is gonna be.
There are a couple spots to start, sort of see how the progresses. I mean, I think So like VYCC allows people to park and access the trails,
not Naomi's completely forest.
but it connects currently to their trail network.
But you can't park, you're not supposed to park there to come over to Naomi's community forest, that's the last I heard.
VYCC, I think.
That may be changing, we don't know.
Yeah,
Or I think you said they discourage parking, which is how I understood. it.
Yeah.
well,
A little while
they
ago.
have some space there available, they
Yeah.
don't sign it for recreation use, but they host a public trail network and people park there to use it, so.
Okay,
I have friends
Yeah, I
who
was
are
just
employees
like-
there, and like, I'll meet them and go for a run, and we'll run over to Andrews and back, or run around on the VYCC trail.
yeah.
I tend not to bike there, cause it's a little bit interesting to ride my bicycle, but it's great running. Yeah, so it's all, it's all one ecosystem, so I think, as an entity that's working with those, like that private landowner and with VYCC as well, like, wanted to make sure we could sit with this committee and talk about, cause like, they're all obviously connected and interrelated. Like, same thing with, the Sunshines, like, we work with the Sunshines on their land, and, I've been up there and I do a lot of bridge work, and like, that could tie into Andrews someday too. They don't have parking access currently at their trails and don't plan to, but that's all one ecosystem as well, just as we were talking about before, like the Cochran's and the Preston Reserve and Mike's property, like it all connects and, everyone shares lines and shares trails, so. Wanted to sort of talk through that as well, and if there's sort of any questions on that, in addition.
They'll connect into one of the, do you say the Bass Trail?
Yeah, the plan is to go all the way into the vast trail that's on the corner of their parcel there, right by VYCC.
Is that Andrews?
It's Andrews, it's
Maplewind.
it's Maplewind.
They have a bit of the.
And then it becomes, VYCC.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they had a little bit of.
Yeah.
It's like the corner of that field, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they mow that for pasture use, so to be on the side of that, out of their way.
The vast trail there at the meadow is on Maplewood property.
Oh, okay. I was assuming the fence was there.
No, it's on the other, it's the side of the woods, is where
Okay.
it's, for whatever reason, they switched. Andrew switched it to the other side at that point. Yep.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay. So this would be the only public, public property in this ecosystem that you're talking about, public meaning owned by the town.
Yeah, I mean, Andrews Town Forest is the only town land in Richmond with any kind of elevation.
Over Rocker Park, I thought that was,
That doesn't have any elevation change.
right,
Like,
right,
there's stuff down by the river, there's the volunteer
Right.
green, there's the ball fields.
right,
but,
okay. Well, what I was thinking is, I've heard in the past, mostly, through Chase, the offer that folks could help maintain the trails when they're built. And, I'm thinking maybe both for the building and for the maintenance, being it public and, if we could make sure the community has an opportunity to sort of come and learn and help if there's a volunteer day, have it not just advertised among, Richmond Mountain Trails, but to the whole community, to have people feel a sense of ownership. So it's not like their trails, it's our trails. And I just didn't know if you did that with other areas and how well that worked out. That's why I was asking. If we
That's
were
a
the only
great
part.
plan, and what you said is absolutely true, when people come and volunteer and they've worked on a corner or cleared brush or done whatever, they feel a huge amount of ownership for it, and that's great, we try to do that, we've had really good luck reaching out.
Yeah, Richmond Trail Running Club comes a bunch of volunteers when we host days, which has been really awesome. Particularly when you a lot of their uses at Preston, so when we're doing work up there, like. We emailed the Trails Committee this season when a bunch of the bridges washed out and had volunteer parties throughout the fall and did 5 bridges over the fall up in there, and Trail Running Club came out like with a bunch of lumber, which is really generous. And I think, yeah, a lot of that too is like there is a lot of trail in town here, and like having the ability for people to like claim sections and like really, support and maintain those trails, I think is really valuable, because people like certain ones, like I have certain trails that if I have, an afternoon and I do a lot of trail work in town, like those are the ones I like to go work on, these are the ones I like to use, and I hope that like other people become attached to other sections, because that's sort of how everything is, maintained, stays in good shape.
And that's, I feel that way also about like invasive species. The more that we can have like community days for removal instead of just, well, we'll hire somebody. Because the invasives will show up from somebody else's property, but if they've removed it on the town forest, then we realize, oh, maybe having barberry in my front yard isn't a good idea. So it's just one thought, it'd be great if it's not, like, look at your talk, horse in the mouth, but it'd be great to have. Community involved.
Time wise, we should get ready to move on. What?
Yeah, well, that was finished, as final comments, if I may.
Yeah,
Well, just that, and partly this is for Trails Committee, that the, volunteer days should be publicised widely. And as I think they used to be in the old days, but, recently I haven't seen a lot of trail, work that is announced by the Trail Committee, but, you know, of course, we all want to help to the extent that we can, and all volunteers are really very welcome, so,
Yeah, I think that's really important to me, and I think like as many people as possible, like. I live up in Bolton and like we really struggle with maintaining the Preston Forest up there. There's not a lot of users that really like to give back their time, and it's like 3 people who really do all the trail work in that entire trail system that's used more than a lot of trails in Chittenden County. There's a lot of traffic up there, and I think fostering that ecosystem where like everyone wants to get involved is like absolutely fundamental. And I think you're right, probably to the extent that like maybe we could do a better job of like putting our trail days on, like we have. You know, we communicate via email normally and social media with most of our users, but like we should probably get back on Front Porch Forum. We had one board member who stepped down recently who was really good about that. To make sure we can get as many people who want to come as possible, because honestly, like.
I would have seen it.
We do normally like weekly over the course of the summer, and like some days when it's raining, like we get 4 people and you're like, oh shoot, like wish we had 10 people, like that would get quite a lot more done this evening. And there's a lot of people in town here who really put a lot of time and love and effort into these trails, and I think getting them all involved is great.
What if we scheduled a invasive removal day in the spring and we leaned on RMT to put the word out? Including, and also do compost forum and such. And we get John Cart to help organize that, but. That
Yeah.
might be a great way to demonstrate, this sort of good faith relationship. Utilize their volunteers, we can,
Yeah, and we could feel out how the communication chain works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
great idea.
it's not a trail thing, it's great for the forest and,
Ethan had some specific things he was holding back, because I did work with some of my students and we had some kids from the school come in past years. And but there's some pieces he thought, oh, we need professionals for that. But you guys are like professionals. Like you might have a set of skills that our middle schoolers don't. So.
He may be talking
So
about.
there are some listed things.
That may have been about applying for herbicides.
yeah, that's probably not a good volunteer.
Cause you gotta,
Yeah.
that's true,
There's
but the
that.
mechanical removal
The
that,
mechanical.
when Brandon was here.
We should always
so
talk about
that is very strange. But anyway, Brandon might have one of Ethan's maps that targets where some of the
Right.
stuff is. And that he could work with John Carter. That'd be cool.
Is that a motion worthy concept or how do we?
so we have actually 2 people online who'd like to,
And Nancy,
Nancy would be first.
do you want to share?
Yes. Good evening. Yeah, my question for the Richmond Trails people is basically what is your or your membership's expertise, interest, experience, or knowledge in recreation trail-based effects on conservation? Things like habitat and wildlife movement corridors. And related to that, do you have any specific familiarity with the Andrews Community Forest and its special relationship to the Chittenden County uplands and, the state, considering it's a high priority forest block and important to keep it intact, especially coming from the point of view as, a group that wants to build trails? Thank you.
Sure, yeah.
Do you wanna go?
I'll go quickly and then verify some additional information, but I've been involved with Andrews Community Forest since working to get a Conservation Alliance grant to help purchase it with the town through the Vermont Land Trust since its inception, so I've been pretty intimately involved in the entire process and believe really strongly in the conservation value of recreation and conservation. If you look at the Appalachian Trail, that whole corridor is preserved because people have taken an active interest in that large scale ecosystem. I'm also very well aware that we're trying to connect the Winooski River and to the highest part to the state on both sides, and we need to make space for wildlife to move around, and that most of the people I've talked to the state see it as a totally viable and noble project that goes hand in hand with having people out enjoying nature, whether they're hunting or using the land in other ways. And all of that being said, you need to be careful about specific areas that are, you know, higher value or higher elevation. But it can all be done in a way that benefits everyone.
Thanks, Jeanette. You have your hand up?
Hi,
online?
everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks a lot for all that you guys are doing. What perked my interest was hearing about the invasives. I didn't realize the Richmond Mountain Trail crew was doing so much with invasives. I'd love to know, you know, how much you've actually done, and also to speak on behalf of the RCC that I'm a part of. We've been trying to wrap our arms around how to promote a more community-wide effort. So it'd be great if we could somehow connect, and the Richmond Conservation Commission could hear from you as well and what you need, because we have a great interest in getting the community more involved with removing invasives.
Yeah, great question. Not our area of expertise. I think it was a great idea by Jim about sort of maybe a way we could start to interface and utilize volunteers that, you know, come regularly, and something I'd like to learn more about too. But yeah, we definitely tend to stay in the trail maintenance and work realm when we coordinate volunteer efforts.
But Jeanette, what the question came up, but they had the ability to gather a lot of volunteers that would be interested in general maintenance. So it sounded like a nice way for us to start to work together with them, helping promote our invasive removal in the spring.
And for us,
That makes sense.
we have a lot of folks who live in town who are members who are excited about the town forest, and I think, you know, making an opportunity available to them to actually get involved. I know a lot of them provided, you know, public feedback and public comment over the sort of pace of the scoping, but haven't really been able to like do actually any work on the forest. So it could be a good opportunity for people who are, you know, chomping at the bit a little bit to, you know, get out there and actually get their hands dirty.
Yeah, and we have, again, with a broad membership, we have lots of people with different interests. You know, personally, you know, as I learned about different invasives, you just can't understand once you do see them. And so when, especially in the shoulder seasons, when some of them are easier to see, you know, when I'm taking my dogs for a walk or going for a run, I end up, you know, I don't wear a watch on the heart rate monitor, so I can stop and pull some things up and hang by the roots. And other people do the same thing. So if we, you know, can share that with more people, I think that can help too. But yeah, what Merrick says is absolutely right. We could get volunteers to, you know, help on a project like that. We wouldn't be spearheading that from our expertise.
All right,
We
well,
want to make sure we get to the law. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah,
Thank you.
thanks so much. I just want to say one more time that we could use an army to help with this community-wide effort. It sounds like you certainly have that. And so who would I contact when we launch our efforts in the spring?
Yeah, if you email, I mean, either the committee's probably gonna have to coordinate it, because we're not really in a spot to coordinate any efforts yet, but if you are interested in reaching out to RMT, my name will be in the minutes, and my email is just my name at gmail.com, and you're definitely let's connect in any manner if you'd like to sort of continue those efforts. I do want to make sure, in
great.
case we have one more agenda item, just to turn to existing maintenance, if we had a second
Sure.
to
Okay,
discuss.
I just want to finish that thought, which is, could you please report back to the Trails Committee that there's a strong interest to collaborate with the RCC?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Existing trail maintenance, a couple of folks who volunteer regularly with us, and part of the reason we have a board and Mike and I go to meetings and other people do go to meetings, and some people like literally only want to dig and they don't want to do any of the email stuff. It's just like, I want to volunteer my time. So a few people are wondering if they're able to do that at Andrews currently, and I basically, my relay had been, no, we need to ask before people are out doing work.
You need to ask, we have had some.
No, I totally,
Yeah, just because it's towns.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we're.
So that was
we're-
the ask,
we're the gatekeeper.
yeah, about sort of,
But we've just had someone who did some lovely trail work, but they didn't check in with us at all, so we had previously just done a trail maintenance day, and we're planning to circle back to a project, and we're surprised to find lo and behold, someone had just kind of.
We thought Wright did some really nice chainsaw art.
It was lovely what they did check in with that person and said, hey, join us on a trails day when we're having a trail maintenance. You can't just go in the forest for a variety of reasons and do trail maintenance.
that's good.
Right, I think that's what Merrick was saying.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what is the process? Like, would you like us to help with any trail maintenance and how should we do that?
And I think there was more so for existing trails, so like, for instance, right now, in the Preston Reserve, we have volunteers who go out in the spring, they clear blowdowns, they do the drains. You know, we leaf blow the trails in the beginning of the season, that's work that's sort of ongoing in terms of routine maintenance. And we don't like check in when there's a blowdown with the trails committee and say, hey, there's one blowdown across the Preston loop, like, can we go clear it? It's just sort of part of what we do when we have volunteers, and some of those volunteers like are doing it on behalf of the trails committee, and some are maybe on behalf of volunteer. At the end of the day, no one really cares, we're just gonna go clear the tree because there's a tree in the way. So it's that sort of work, and then there has been sort of additional work, so for instance, this summer, we rerouted a section of trail in the Preston Forest, and like, that is not a trail that like we actively manage, so we sent an email to the trails committee, we're like, hey, here's a picture, like, what do you think about going around here, and we'll close up the old one, and like, got the approval for that, so I think that was a relationship that worked, and I wanted to check in about like, what might work in this extent
So
about
I
like.
think it would be different because it is the town property, but different from what you described, where, hey, you saw something, you just went in and took care of it. Like, I think that there's a little bit of more formal where, those things will be coordinated with either the trails committee or this committee.
Great.
So I don't think it would be the relationship where you just have carte blanche to go take care of whatever.
Sure, yeah, no, I don't think the request is like carte blanche, is more like people wanna go do work and if they have time, so it's like the ability to do that is sometimes. Like if the committee needs to meet to discuss that, and if we maybe would wanna like develop some sort of agreement where it's like, hey. This is a list of items that like we feel comfortable tackling without like a committee meeting or like, you know, needing sign off from like a quorum versus like, hey, this is activities where we want people to, you know. Check in and like have a formal discussion, so it's like, I don't know, when I, for instance. And like, when I hike, I kick drains in all the time, right, like little like tunnels that are in the way, you just like use your foot of your boot, like I do that on Andrews, like I'm not trying to do like trail work. But it's like, where do you draw the line, right, like,
Yeah.
do I go up in Andrews with a shovel? No, like that's something that like we don't have, we haven't had that conversation to sort of discuss, but there are lots of people who, you know, take matters into their hands, they're like, there's this muddy spot, like I wanna fix it, so. If we can sort of facilitate that, and if people were sort of curious about like what it might look like at this point and what would be allowed to do, it sounds like we would wanna have more of a discussion before maybe getting to that point.
Yeah, right, you wanna
Well, I was
add
just
something?
adding to that, maybe it would help us if you had time. To send us a. Sort of a narrative of what you are proposing for volunteer trail maintenance on existing trails. So that we can think, cause you're the first group that's offering it, that so we can think about. This is a good idea, or we'd like to, you know, we like 60% of it, but then we gotta work on the 40% to understand it, and. That would, to me, that would be helpful to,
It would be helpful, because we haven't really set up this mechanism, we've honestly
Yeah.
really been doing it ourselves.
right,
Right,
So,
Well, and we also have,
I think we could describe that in like a sentence, right? I mean, you just did, it's blowdowns, it's drains.
and again,
Any reroute would require permission,
right,
that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, reroute or like ridge something,
Yeah,
but it is like pretty, it's pretty.
but there would be an existing trail map. So that we would know that the volunteers are working on these. I don't know, 4, 6, whatever it is,
you talk to
existing trails,
common language, common names.
right, and. That would be helpful, 'cause
can I propose that we come up with an outlined sort of trial plan for our spring trail maintenance? And in addition to, it might be a nice time to try out and see how it works, but we could outline it for spring and start kind of thinking about leveling up our trail maintenance
Okay, so we just need to.
Cause we're a little over time.
Just need to check with the town manager because the rule is that, I mean, we're not choosing someone to do trail maintenance, but a trial. We're supposed to have it approved by the select board if we choose someone to do trail maintenance. So if this is a trial, I would at least check with Josh.
And with the trails committee.
And with the lawyer for the town, yeah, to say that, but yeah, ultimately, we need something written to put into our trail management plan, I mean, that's part of it, it's not just a map of trails, it's how we're gonna take care of them over time. Doesn't have to be long, it's like a page, but just so it's crystal clear what the process is. Do you mention it to the town manager before you go, do you mention it to the chair, do you wait for somebody to invite you, we'll just have to figure that
Well,
out.
that sounds like we need to do that, not them, right?
Right, no, but if they could write down
Somebody,
just
yeah.
what they're offering in those couple of sentences or paragraphs, so that we know, cause
And
I
I think
don't
there's
know
kind of,
what you're doing.
I guess I've heard from,
I would say I think there's like three levels of things, you divided into two, but I think there's one that like probably, and I might be overstepping here, but like, I think we could probably all agree that like if a branch falls across a trail, that's an existing trail that's been built that you guys have sanctioned like organic way, and a user picks it up and throws it off to the side, that's okay. And then there's things like, boy, we just had 8 inches of rain in 12 hours and it's a trench and been washed away, it'd be better to go up on that hill over there. That's clearly something that needs approval. And then there's a whole lot that's in the middle. Can we use chainsaws?
Exactly.
You know, can we build a bridge? Those I think would also probably get approval.
Chase, we are running over time. We've gained 5 minutes, but we're still over time. So I'm hoping we can sort of wrap up this by saying thanks very much for contacting this committee and thanks very much for coming along. And I think we've learned a lot and we should stay in contact. Is that a good way to?
Yeah,
leave things?
yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, the thing that I put on there in parentheses, so I wouldn't forget. We had a volunteer who wanted to bring a scout troop up there, and I said I'd run that by you guys to do work on existing trails. This is Jake, the Williston troop. He does a lot of work with them in the past, so if there's projects, like it could be invasive removal that they might want to contribute to. I just said I'd float that because
Oh, cool.
they like to do the work and they like to do it on like town parcels and stuff. It's, I don't know.
What time frame there?
In the spring.
Great.
Yeah.
There's a Richmond troop too, so you might wanna rendezvous with them, you know what I mean, since it's our town forest and there's a.
Sure, yeah, and so like, we absolutely agree, and like, we try to coordinate, like, a lot of things come to us, and I just try to make them happen, so like, this is a Williston resident who has a connection to the Williston troop, and is like, can I go to Andrews? I was like, you should ask, let's make the ask.
I could just see that.
And that would be
Of course, the Williston troop here.
For the spring, so
In the
we
spring,
know by then whether or not.
Yeah, so I think, when I want to be respectful of your time, like, we can follow up the emails and things, but it was more just making sure that, you know, we can get in front of you, just so you can put the faces and names and just offer some, you know, we hopefully can help out in some ways. I serve on a number of other town committees and like understand the constraints of the town committee, so like, we are fortunate to not have to operate with those constraints as a private entity, it can meet and text and make decisions quite quickly, so. If we can, that can help out in any way too, like, we want to make sure that, you know, we're here and able to sort of help where we have some strengths, so.
You know,
You guys.
if
Thank
you
you.
have written agreements with other entities, that might be helpful as a kind of a template for us to do our own. I don't know if you have any.
Sure,
You know, they
yeah,
could cover like basically what Mike was saying.
yeah,
Three
I think
things.
we could pull something together, because we can, I don't want to take too much.
Yeah, we'll take your time, we can look at our emails we have with the Richmond Trails Committee and probably.
Yeah.
Get 80% of
Sounds
them.
simple.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you.
Moving along
Moving along.
to the next. Julian still isn't here. Are we gonna drop him? We really wanted to hear about.
Oh, yes.
The meeting in Cali.
Anyone else wants?
So we're going 5 minutes, but we're definitely running behind time, so let's try and get into express mode on revisions to the management plan. So everyone knows. I hope you've seen it in the packet, but it's still 61 pages long. And so I feel like I've done what I can in the sense of compiling material, bringing in the material that I described at our last meeting and listed. And I think I've done most of that, but in the process adding to the length. And a major addition actually has been the wildlife stewardship plan, which is a very long document. And I asked Brad to help me with that, and he took over the sections that relate to natural resources and wildlife, in particular adopting the approach that the state is recommending, which is to consider an area such as the Andrews Forest and its surrounding land in terms of landscape, communities and species. So the three categorizing things three ways. So that was a substantial task to adopt that structure within the management plan. The result is that things are very lengthy. And maybe I should just mention what I mentioned before, which I tried very hard to separate material into the background material, which conventionally seems to come first in management plans, and then the objectives and the actions come in a second half, whatever, of the management plan. I mean, personally, I find that frustrating. I want to get to what's the plan, what's the action, but there's a lot of material which is descriptive and I guess essential to lay the groundwork for why we need objectives and how we're going to implement them. So anyway, where we've got to is, as you know, is a provision that includes the additional material and that has been restructured into that form. And so what I sent just last night is a list of the table of contents list. I added names to it so that requesting that people look at the two parts, the relevant material in the introductory half of the plan, and then the relevant part in actions and in objectives and actions. So that's my question this evening is that list of assignments agreeable? Can we move forward with that? Melissa has an opinion about that or something. Go ahead.
I think it's admirable that we're going to do some work on this, further work. Please be very careful. As you recall, our mandate was that when two or more people are taking away work and working on it out of the public eye, that is where open meeting law is broken.
Two or more.
That's
more
right.
than two.
And so Josh's recommendation to us, when the three of us sat with Josh, is that one person take away something and can bring it back for public and further committee comment. But when people take work away in a group out of the public eye, that is breaking open meeting law.
Well,
because open meeting law is, the purpose is so that business is not conducted out of the public eye.
That's something that, yeah, we have.
But
we have
wouldn't
to
we
very much aware of.
individually each be taking something?
Yes, you can do that.
And is not.
You're saying that the items that have two names on it, so for example, Brad and Sam on wildlife, they would have to subdivide that and work on it individually.
So it's a gray area. But that was the guidance that when the three of us sat with Josh, is that when you're getting two or more people starting to work on something, they take it out of the public eye so that there's not public comment on the crafting of material. Then you're edging towards that line. I suppose two people could take it away and work on it, and then, but everything that you've worked on would need to have.
You come back to the full group.
You need to
for
walk it
deliberation.
through for public comment, but you're definitely, so. We had a comment made, I think it was on the wildlife stewardship plan, and that was the reason that we met with the chair of the select board and the town manager. They called us in because a complaint was made on this committee breaking open meeting law. Do you recall this, Ian, the meeting we had with Josh?
Yeah.
And with David Sanders regarding our breaking open meeting law? This meeting was a few months.
Well,
ago.
yeah.
You were there,
Yeah.
so,
And the question really resolved, I think, around what's a work party and what's a subcommittee. And I think one thing I remember from that meeting was that it was what, the idea that people work on a document and then put it in the packet for a discussion at this meeting. That's a way to keep these kinds of
But that's
efforts in the
exactly
public
what-
eye.
That's what got us in trouble, was people doing that exact same thing. The wildlife stewardship was worked on by a small group, put in the packet, and a complaint was made on us.
But I don't understand, that's what you're supposed to do,
What?
and then it's presented for public deliberation at the meeting.
So
So
you're
what
saying-
did they complain about?
It has to be individuals.
So because a group of people from the committee were working on the material outside of the public eye and opportunity to comment, that was a violation of.
But it was-
open meeting.
But if it's brought to the full committee for public deliberation, I thought that's where the public eye and.
Why don't we get an opinion from Josh?
I think you should go back to Josh on this and ask again, because this is what he told us, that you're really walking up to the line when you're, how many people work in the wildlife stewardship? 3?
Started with 3. and
Yeah.
Pretty much. got
3, but I was not on this committee at the
So-
time, so
so
it's really just
What
2 committee
you
members.
can use- It triggered a complaint, which was a valid complaint and was taken up by the select board and the town manager. So we were duly warned. We sat in a meeting and we heard about that, so I'm just telling you, you were there, and if you have further questions, I suggest you contact Josh about it.
Well, do you have a recommendation? I mean, if I'm suggesting that there are sections that should be looked at by 2 people, which I think has great advantages.
I
if I'm
suggest you
relatively-
ask, I don't wanna waste any more time, I suggest you ask Josh about
But
it.
so, yeah, but
I just don't.
we should have
Yeah.
in mind what is a practical, so if this is a problem, what's the practical solution? Is the solution to designate just one person to work on
Well,
it?
that was
on
what
each
he said
section?
in the meeting is the safest way to go. He said the safest thing to do is to have one person work on it and bring it back and present it for discussion and by the public and the committee. That was, those were, I think, what his exact words, the safest option is to do this. So it's a gray area. I don't want to waste time. I suggest you check with him.
Now, could we hypothetically have a meeting outside of our normal meetings where we have a quorum and we all work together and we like, I don't know.
People have access,
Right.
Yeah,
just like.
yes, you can.
Are you gonna
We could say we're gonna meet every day for the next 5 days as long as we warned it according to the rules.
And 2 minutes.
And
Yes,
just,
and 2 minutes and invite people. Yeah, we could do that.
not that I'm advocating that.
Well, I was very much hoping that I could sit back for 6 weeks until the end of January and have other people working on this. I mean, are we at an impasse about what are we gonna do for the next 6 weeks?
Let's just default to one person per section. And if we hear otherwise, then another person can join them.
Okay,
But I seem to have a problem. I only see Wright having things to do on my,
No, I've got many.
yeah, on my table of contents, but I'm looking over.
I
the
see,
shoulder,
I see.
And I see my name. so-
You're on the second page,
Are you
I
looking
think,
at-
Cecilia.
Number 10.
Oh, your first page doesn't have, yeah, my first page has you on it.
Yeah, mine
Mine
does too.
isn't, And I looked.
Well,
at
you gotta be looking at today.
Is it 10?
I did, I looked
Number
at the
10?
11. Oh, wait a minute, maybe
It should be draft. 10.
That might be the one that was in the,
I didn't get it
yeah,
that
the
either.
one online.
yeah, so that one's,
That's not,
he sent an a follow-up email that had more names on it. So there's
Okay.
an
Just did
email
that.
that has the updated.
Yeah.
There we go.
I didn't get it either, Cecilia. so.
I just thought, oh, Ray can do everything. We don't want to be arguing about.
do not want that to happen.
That's right.
Ian can take a break.
See you in 6
Bryce can
weeks.
do it.
There you go.
Oh, there it is. Oh, it's 10. I opened 9, sorry.
So Ian, no one would be looking at sections 1 and 2. Or 2.3.
Ian,
this is the wrong one, this doesn't have the highlights. Sorry, did you get it, Melissa, the one with the highlights?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
In
So I
version
should
10.
stop, sorry, I should stop sharing and let you put that one up. Do you have it, the one with the highlighted names, or should I keep looking for it?
Maybe someone else, because I've got this open and I'm taking minutes on my computer, so it's
No,
really
that's
hard for me to do
I have
as well.
That's what he's looking for.
Oh,
Can you get that
let me forward it back.
to Ian?
Ian, I'm gonna email it back to you.
It's version 10. In that title.
I just emailed version back to you,
The,
and I will forward it to. Do you have it now, Brad?
I just sent it to him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he said, yeah, thanks, Jim.
Anyone else need it?
Got it.
that's another good time.
And it is. And it's a PDF though. So we're supposed to edit the PDF.
I. On an earlier version. I was able to convert it to a Word doc, so that's a great point. Because everybody may not have PDF editing.
Yeah.
Software, like,
So, yeah, Ian, is there a working version you wanna send out that we would all?
In
I'm kind
Word,
of got the one that has the highlighted names.
We just emailed it to you.
Yeah, but I've got it on my computer, but I can't seem to bring it up in
it's
the,
slow,
in
yeah,
the share.
it's slow to open in the
Yeah.
internet's room.
Ian, you can convert to Word though, right? PDF to Word through Adobe.
There it is. It just took a little while.
So
There we go.
There you go.
seems reasonable that,
So I don't know if that's visible, but is it big enough? But if it's trying to put up people's names, so Cecilia is on her own. For the first one, and then we've got ecological resources, and I was looking for Brad and Sam to look at that, and that sort of links with one that comes in the second part. That would be section 6, where I assign Brad and Sam. So if the solution is to identify one person, can one of you do the first of those and the other do the second? And then the same would apply to all of
Jim,
the others where we have 2 people assigned.
And do we know what we're supposed to do with each section?
Yeah, what do we do? What's your vision for what we do in these sections?
Well, ideally, you see it was gonna be look at the 2 parts and identify duplication between the first one and the second, the background one and
Between
the
background
objective
and
one.
actions.
And so if one person is gonna work on the first one, the background one, well, I hadn't really thought this through, how to divide responsibility. It really, the 2 go together.
What, can you tell us define the mission a little bit better, please? It doesn't matter whether 1 or 2 is working on it. What is the mission?
Yeah.
That's what he's struggling with.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
so
it's the select board.
Basically-
Satisfying the select board, right? It doesn't matter.
To ultimately,
And to make it something that, you know, the objective is to avoid duplication between the background and the objectives sections. And,
Do you wanna have just 1 in the end? Do you wanna have the objectives be abutting the background?
the temptation in writing objectives is to put a whole preamble section, and so many of them have a kind of a preamble section. Which should really be a summary of what's in the background chapter section. So the challenge is to to identify duplication between what's in the background and what's in the objectives.
I'll be right.
Is that the only objective in tackling these sections, or is it also to, I'm assuming to look over the section and offer other feedback as well, if there's something that needs to be updated?
Yeah, ideally, yes.
Okay,
You mean
Oh, that's
outside of the assigned?
outside of the just checking for duplication between the
Yeah.
two sections, you know, if you were looking at a certain section of it and it seemed like something was missing or, you know, incorrect or needed to be adjusted, then you could offer edits on that as well.
So this next step would basically be focused on eliminating duplications and maybe condensing if possible, right, shortening. We don't worry about the contradictions that may be in here, because it is fairly disparate. I mean, this was derived from about, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe 6 different assignments that Daniel doled out. Well, then that whole bunch in the management sections, those were doled out, and it's all dumped in here. So there's a fair amount of redundancy, but also conflicts, I think, somewhere.
I think it's also tricky because if you look at a document like the Richmond Town Plan, you'll see almost sometimes, in my opinion, too much separation. Where in an effort to make it more concise, if you have 2 different sections that touch on the same topic and it's removed from one for, you know, to make it concise, if you're going to the Richmond Town Plan because you want to find out about development, you might not find anything about wildlife in it, you know, and as that pertains to development, because it was cut for clarity. So like, I think that's another thing for us to consider is some things might be in multiple sections, but should they be, or should they not be? I mean, it's nice to have a nice quick document, but I don't think that everyone going to the plan is necessarily going to look at it front to back. They're like, I just want to go to the section that addresses what I'm looking at right now. And if you cut the duplication, then you can end up with stuff missing from a section that somebody's reading from to get guidance.
Well, that makes really good sense.
Mike, do you wanna?
I pulled it up, this afternoon, just take a look at it, it's been a while since I looked at it, and just as a member of the public, I'd say is, I think you've got a bunch of different goals here. Jim said one, the select board needs to approve it, if they don't, it's a lot of time spent, and then you have to go back and fix it, or do it over.
Right.
But it's a management plan, the purpose of the management plan is to direct the management. I would say the more you can do to actually make the management piece of it concise, while not cutting out important things, is important. Most members of the public are not gonna read a 200-page document, they're not gonna read a 20-page document. But if you have the appendices and the other supporting information there so that it's referenced appropriately, if someone does go to a section, and then you can reference, you know, you have a section on wildlife or invasives, you know, you can reference invasives in 7 other sections by going to look at appendix C or whatever. But I would say that the more you can do to make it human readable, the better document it's gonna be for the town. Would just be my short answer. And there's always this competing interest between wanting to have all the information possible in there. And there are lots of people through the history of the committee who have had really deep either passions or professional experience, and that's great, and I think that's perfect for an appendix, but if you can narrow it down to, this is a management plan, this is what we're doing for forest, for the animals, for the trails, for the users, that's kind of the goal of it.
Thanks.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a good strategy. If you can go to the objectives and see what the actual objectives are. So if there's some additional, you know, redundancy, I guess, then yeah, you put it in an appendix or you put it in the background, so that you can just get to the point if you're looking at the objectives.
So, when I added the whole cultural history section was new in this one, so we had history starting with the Andrews family. I went in and I added, objectives now and actions into each of the categories, not just the cultural history one, because sometimes it mattered in silvicultural treatments, you know, which species you're gonna protect or whatever. Sometimes it was in trails, if we wanted to name trails and Abenaki words. So you'll see those scattered throughout intentionally the whole document so that the Indigenous people section wasn't just sort of a little colony, but it was scattered throughout. So if you're going through and trying to shorten that and have an urge to put them into the cultural history section, just see if it makes sense where I put it. I realized I was trotting into other people's sections, but I did that intentionally. That makes sense.
You know, a further issue that I think we have to grapple with is that there are so many objectives and so many actions associated with it. I made a count. It's in here somewhere. It was like dozens of both. I think it was 68 objectives and 84 actions. I sent that out in an email. So, you know, that's more than one every week. So this would be a full-time job for somebody just to monitor it. So that is a real challenge for those of you who wrote objectives and actions in response to Daniel's plan. Look at it again and say, can these things be consolidated? Can they, is there duplication? You know, what is there some way to reduce the number of items in those lists?
I think, you know, one check might be, and I'm as guilty as anyone on that, because I know on the wildlife thing, I was just kind of brainstorming more. In fact, I'd always leave another empty bullet on that thing for other people to brainstorm, like, hey, let's get even more things we can do without really considering. It's because it was just, that's how you brainstorm. I never went back and said, okay, what's realistic? You know, there's 9 of us here. Maybe community volunteers can come in, but what can we really do in the time, the volunteer resources, financial, all this. And Daniel, I remember the original form had a priority column. So you come up with your objectives and then he said, do priorities. And I ended it. I was frazzled by trying to figure out what the difference between an objective and a goal and management.
What if we had a process where at the beginning of a given season or whatever time frame, we sat down and identified a handful of the objectives that we were gonna target, but it's okay for more objectives to live in the plan than we can get to. It's us recognizing that there are more things.
Do like an annual plan.
Yeah, I would say, we're gonna focus this fall on blank, 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 and blank. You know, we pick one from several sections.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much an accountability chart or as a menu to choose from.
Right. That's cool.
Well, how are we gonna do this? You know, I volunteered to spend 6 weeks producing what you have in front of you. And I thought the only way to move forward realistically was to divide things up between us for the next step. Where people who have expertise or experience, you know, can address the thing that they know about. So just what I guess we need volunteers. We need either somebody is got one individual is gonna take over the next 6 weeks and so that by January we have another draft. Or we divide it up somehow between us and apparently if we really can't work in teams, then the double names that I put on sections need to be reduced to one name.
Cecilia, do you wanna add?
Yeah.
Well, I wanna respond to that and just follow up on like what you guys were both saying, is that there's like a couple of philosophies in management plans. One is you only put what you're gonna do and then hold yourself accountable and it has a deadline like a work plan or something. On the other hand, another one, and they use this in the state, it sometimes strategically is list a whole bunch of things that would be cool ideas that came out of public processes. So people can see their ideas reflected. They know they've been heard by the committee and it shows up there. And when, you know, the Cub Scout troop or an Eagle Scout comes and wants to do a project, there's like a list of things that would be cool to happen that we've already reviewed and people suggested. And then and that we use that list ourselves to prioritize once a year which of these we want to tackle or something. And when you write grant proposals, they often wanted to see, and this is why the state did it, it has to show up in your, as a priority in your management plan in order to get funding. So I don't know if we're gonna be seeking those kinds of funds, but I would just second the approach that you guys were talking about, particularly you, Chase, and like, let's have a long list and then we can decide to prioritize it, but people's ideas will be reflected. Secondly, whatever happened to the idea of now that this is kind of organized and all the work you do, we hand it to someone else to turn it into the format of a management plan that you know, somebody who has the knowledge and and doesn't have the history to be able to take this and turn it into a format that might be more concise and more streamlined. And I just saw Judy last week, Rosowski from the Conservation Commission, saying, you know, we have the resources, if you guys want to hire somebody to write the plan, then just let us know. So I know we already know that, but.
Yeah, I mean, my intention was to integrate all the materials that we have, including the public input, and, you know, make a compilation, which is one reason that it's a very long document. So, yeah, the question then is it now ready to contract out to a person with the appropriate expertise, which would be management plan expertise, as well as perhaps copy editing expertise, and take it over that way by one person.
So did this, I'm kind of coming up to speed a little bit. Did this look a lot different before you worked on it? Like, what did Daniel have?
Yeah, we have a 2018 management plan, which is the current one, and that was.
And that's completely different than this document.
Not completely, but.
This is built on it.
Because it's really gone through two phases of revision. The first one was by this committee over a period of, 2 years, I suppose, from, roughly 2020 to 22, I would guess, before my time on the committee. And so changes were made, and that management plan was presented up at the school as, okay, here it is. And that revision never went to the select board. So yeah, they're trying to be a brief history. That draft was then taken by, I think, actually 2 members of this committee. One of them anyway was Daniel, who's stuck with it for some time, making further changes. And so that was my starting point. But with that starting point, I wanted to include material that's been generated in the last, maybe in the last 2 years, 22, 24. So that it's been progressing in stages, and that's where it is.
It feels really good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good. I don't know.
It's creating, so in that first rewrite, and Danny was part of that, I was, Amy, Ellen, those guys are on the committee now. We had 2 decisions. We were just trying to integrate the trail plan and add the indigenous cultural history. And as we did it, we saw other things that sometimes they were even flat out errors or things that need to be updated, things that were future tense and now timber harvest has happened and it's changed to past tense.
Yeah.
And so Daniel in particular was like, really wanted to change the whole thing, and the rest of the group was like, let's just change the minimums, just an amend, you know, not an amendment, but it's just a revision, we're not rewriting it. But it's got far enough down the pathway that we could keep it, and we kept the old format, it's the big thing. And which is where some of that redundancy comes from, the things were separated, the same topic is treated twice. We could keep it and just.
Well, yeah, I mean, I want to emphasize that there are a couple of things that I felt had to be included, and I think, you know, we're not in the version that I took over. One was public input. There was public input for a trails plan. There was public input for a management plan, and that was documented. So that was, you know, that was a written record of public input, which superseded the draft that I inherited, really.
Right.
And then the other thing, I suppose, is probably the wildlife management plan, which is another major effort, and smaller things as well, you know, the product of our meetings over the past couple of years, but those were the ones that were documented and really demanding incorporation.
Would you be okay if we hired a contractor to button it up?
Absolutely. I
Okay,
mean, if we feel that it's ready for it, that we're ready for it, you know, have we looked at it critically enough to identify things that are
Yeah.
still contentious, or, you know, that an external person would be able to handle?
Yeah, what if we took the next month, or maybe the next 2 or 3 weeks, and we meet mid-month, whatever. To do that, maybe to go over it, look for, you know, things that just seem glaring, that we would wanna. That personally, say, let's start that way, personally would want the editor to know. Then we talk about it as a group, and agree, disagree on that point. And that becomes part of the marching order for the person.
And in practice, there are just the mechanism is that we could each work on a copy of the one that I sent out last night and either make changes or annotations to it.
Yeah.
And then some person has got to take those 9 different annotated or modified versions and compile them. Another option is that we all have one central document that we designate who is going to be authorized to work on each section. That would make it a lot easier for the person who compiles the results.
I mean, like in the cloud or.
Yeah, so it would be a Google document probably as the mechanism. Well, actually, the first option has 2. One would be we have a document that can be modified, and the other one is we have a document that can only be annotated saying, you know, do this, but you don't actually do it.
I still just wonder with the open meeting law, like how much collaboration we can do on a single document. It almost seems like we would need to do separate documents and then talk about it as a group and put it, maybe it's like a special warm meeting where all we're doing is just taking all of our individual notes and just going section by section and saying like, you know, read down until somebody has something to say about a section, and then we as a group are trying to put it all together. I don't know what would make the most sense there.
I'm wondering if we could hire somebody who we don't just give a well done thing to, and then have them go away, do something and bring us back something perfect. But if we could hire someone who'd be willing to work hourly, kind of a staff, like come to our meetings, hear what we're grappling with. And then when we write our little notes, we just give them to that person, and that person compiles them. So that person wouldn't have to be you. And is willing to work iteratively with us, as opposed to just, oh, for $5,000, I'll rewrite this. You get one shot and one rewrite.
If that person exists, who people to do it. Maybe Melissa's next.
oh, I'm sorry.
I thought that was a really good idea. I was thinking similarly that we could maybe start with someone. It's gonna take a while to find someone, so maybe starting to find that person while we're doing these things, working iteratively with them. Makes a lot of sense, and it would probably end up being like that anyway, because they're gonna come back with their questions. We're gonna be working on some things.
But make them do the prep we thought we needed to do in order to even hire them, maybe.
Could you just go through that again, Cecile? I thought I understood, but I don't know if I did.
Well,
It
did
sounded,
Wright have something to add to the?
Well, I was read over Tyler's, zoning document. I forget about the content of the zoning document, but he is a very thorough writer. And he's a staff employee who, I don't know if he's half-time. I don't know if he's 40 hours or 30 hours or what. But maybe there's a staff person, a town employee, who has the expertise to help us out.
time.
Somehow it doesn't feel like it's in his wheelhouse to me.
I
I
was
don't know.
profoundly disturbed that he thinks a good idea is that we should just in order to not have to deal with the DRB or whatever, anyway, that we should be using old skid trails.
Okay, all right.
Instead, and don't mess them up too much, but use them and you can fix them. I'm like, oh, he
All
doesn't
right.
understand anything about managing.
But that's not a skill as the writers, we're looking at, to do something complicated.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's a personal view or his interpretation.
But you're saying he'd need to understand
He doesn't understand.
General
content area.
modern ecology and.
Yeah, none of that.
But I think that brings up a good question, which is, are we looking for someone who is an expert in all things management? Like, do they need to know about cultural background, and do they need to know about agriculture and
Yeah.
the environment,
This is
all
what
this
we
stuff?
train all the time at UVM. I mean, Daniel was like, there were people, he goes, I have friends, I could name 5 that could do this.
Okay,
That's
So
right,
Yeah.
the forestry management plan is a
Alright.
cousin to this type of thing.
It's a
right?
cousin, yeah, but then there's like the whole field naturalist program, and we crank them out every year, and they're
Yeah.
supposed to look at everything from the soil type to all these different uses in the public input process.
Yeah.
Should we bring in Miles Finch?
At 8 p.m.
That's what they do with Alf when they can't decide.
well, this is so, can we finish up this, cause this is really important.
Yeah, and then I think we should cut it there after that.
Yeah, that's fine, but
At 8 p.m. I have a proposal. I think we've got them.
That's where we are.
Settled. I have a proposal which is, well, first of all, everybody is welcome individually to go through the draft I sent last night and make annotations to it, and probably the PDF version is the easiest one to do that if everyone's happy with that, but work independently. That's one first step. Then the other action is I can phone Josh with, I think, we've got 3 questions. The first is, actually, can we work in teams of 2, or as Melissa is saying, no, that wouldn't be
Well,
legal.
I'm saying no, I'm just repeating what he said at the last.
Yeah,
meeting.
but you said I should check in with him.
Yes, that's what I
So I
said.
can do that.
What I heard was that's
And
walking up to
depend-
the line.
Well, depending on his answer, there would be another question, which is, does the town have a resource person that we can recruit to help us with the editing? And the third question is, well, maybe we know the answer to that, is sending out a request for proposals to an external person who would be doing that editing process. So I can talk through those 3 things with Josh. He's always very approachable, so I hope to have an answer pretty quickly. So is that a good action
Yes.
plan and I can tell people, if Josh says tag teams or teams of 2 can work on sections, then I will let everyone know that, and if the assignments I've made are acceptable, then we've got our homework to do, but I'll let people know what I talked with Josh about.
Yeah, so should we look at the whole thing and try and have comments for the entire thing, or really focus on where you?
Yeah.
The whole.
I mean, maybe
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
As you see fit, or as you're able to, yeah, but definitely make comments, and we can, by some mechanism, we will find a way to share that at our next meeting.
So the whole thing, we look at the whole deal.
I'm sorry,
We look at the whole deal,
yeah,
not just,
yeah, I mean,
your
so I
ideas.
think everyone should do that.
yeah, okay, good.
You know, not necessarily in detail, but find the thing, you know,
Yeah,
man, that's wrong, or, you know,
yeah.
look for errors, or look for things that demand attention.
It seems like it's really good. I can't imagine there's gonna be a lot of.
Really. I
So,
mean, it's not that concise and it's not that cohesive. It needs a flow. You'll see when you get into it.
but
not
maybe
literature,
we
But
don't
it's
need
not,
a
I mean, there's good stuff in there. What do we check out?
But one question is, you said annotations in PDF, so that means little notes, little sticky notes on the side. Would it be easier to do track changes in a Word document or in comments? Or do we put this in the Google Doc and God knows what happens to it then as we move it back and forth? But anyway, I just, like, you can't really move things around in a PDF, but maybe we don't want to, I don't know.
No, you put a comment in saying this should really move to
Yeah.
section.
Don't- yeah,
3.8
don't
on
physically
page
move.
22.
Because then we can merge different, 9 different versions until Word to put them into one.
In
But you're
Word,
right,
but
if
not
we
a
start,
PDF.
right. But if we start moving around, you get a mess. It'll just be all,
But we need a way to make comments.
Yeah, I mean,
well, you can do the comment feature.
Right, but if there's a typo, do we just put in a comment that says there's a typo in this line?
I wouldn't tell you the truth right now. I'd let
Okay.
the editor worry, if it's
Oh.
trivial, just. Because we want to hit the big stuff first,
So are you thinking, like, if my name is on, I think, recreation, I'm gonna maybe leave it alone, or maybe rewrite the whole thing, or just say, I really like this, this is great, or this should be in another section, like, seems like it'd be a good exercise to try and write what we each think should be there, not just comment, not just kind of put in our 2 cents, but actually try and finish it, right? Does that make sense, or?
Yeah, you may like it, or you may like half of it,
Right,
and we're trusting you on that section to.
well, it would be talked about.
So maybe your comment would say, if you have something major, like a rewrite a couple paragraphs, right? Maybe you put a comment in that said, C rewrite, C, JC rewrite with a date or something, and then tack it onto the end.
Yeah,
That'd be,
gotcha.
then it doesn't clutter up the middle.
I'll handwrite it in cursive.
Thank you, because that's what I'm gonna do.
Sounds
And
good.
notarize.
That's the other option, print it out and take a pen to it, but the old fashioned way, but maybe could we have a show of hands? Who wants to work with the PDF and who wants to work with a Word document? So,
I've never seen a communal editing process on a PDF work well.
It can, but you have to have that, right, you have to have the PDF, you have to pay for,
Yeah,
Sorry, PDF.
Acrobat Pro or something.
Oh, yeah, right.
yeah, you gotta go up, I mean.
And everyone needs to have it and it's a software.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah,
not cheap, really.
I mean, my understanding is that because of open meeting law, we can't all be working on one document and seeing what other people are doing. Apparently we've got to work independently.
But there is that merge feature that,
Yeah.
yeah, so. Or if we give them all to somebody and track changes, I'll go with either, but no, I haven't seen, I'm imagining if we have to have rules about. Well, if we each have our own Word document, what does it matter if we move things around? We're not ruining.
Well,
I
then
think it gets
then
hard.
somebody's gotta then wade through 9 documents.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
create the first, and it's tedious, but maybe, that may be the only.
Like PowerPoint might not be better.
If
So
you
my-
did that, I think you'd have to like highlight it and put a note by the thing that's moved, cause yeah, if somebody's looking at 9 versions. And suddenly they happen upon a paragraph that doesn't look like the other 9 versions,
Yeah.
they don't know where that came from, and then they're gonna have to hunt down. Where it came from, I think it would make the most sense to have every single document be the same with different annotations, and then that way, someone can go through. It, section by section and cross-reference, all 9 annotated versions and then integrate into each section one at a time versus like, oh, well, where'd this come from? Now I gotta control F the original document and go find where it came from.
You know
That
what,
just sounds
also,
like it'd be
the
really hard.
person that we end up with may have the solution to this. They may have worked with,
So are we waiting until we have someone to annotate that?
oh, no.
What if we did just limit ourselves to Ian's assignments? And it's not the whole document getting reworked. It's
Yeah,
our
and
little-
then the expert can opine on the best way to consolidate and choose a common level of detail.
And if there's something egregious or something really obvious, that's in a separate section.
So
We're reading the whole thing, but really just having any detailed comments on our sections, but look at the whole thing so we can be familiar, and if we wanna add a comment, we can.
Yeah,
Seems like a good.
Yeah.
And I just wanna make sure I get this correctly in the notes, so we're all just putting annotations in comments, we're not fooling with the original text, and we will let someone else put in the annotations and comments, or.
As we decide,
So don't hit erase and then start writing.
correct.
And my question is, do people like to do that in a PDF or do they like to do it in a Word document?
a Word, yeah, I would have to
Word.
get a Word document and open it as a Google Doc.
that's what you would do?
I don't have a Microsoft Word, yeah,
But that works.
but it's same, they're fluid, yeah.
If they're just comments on the side of a document, then does it matter? Like if one person has a PDF with a little yellow sticky note on the side or whatever it looks like. If somebody's gonna have to manually go through all of these
Yeah.
separate annotated versions. Doesn't matter if one person, as long as the person who's compiling it all has access to those documents, shouldn't matter, right? If one person did a PDF, one person did.
I would think it would have to be copy and pastable, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be harsh on the person.
The other thing would be the page number. So once you start adding comments and things, it makes the page longer and you're gonna start changing page numbers in Word. And it may even change page numbers and breaks if you put it in Google. But there are ways you can do text and like actually number the lines. If we want to.
I thought when you annotated something, it was like in its separate space, like on the right.
Yeah, but then sometimes it takes up.
I see. Yeah, I don't do it a lot, so I don't.
I think Ian's original idea, we each have assignments and we focus on our little spots. And he's done an amazing job of consolidating this stuff. And when we have our little pieces that we bring back, maybe Ian can quickly, put them together. We can talk about each of our little sections that we work on and seems like a good idea to me.
But at the same time, if you see something outside of your self-designated,
Yeah.
make a note of it somewhere.
I might do mine on paper.
And for now, we don't collaborate. There may be two people assigned in a section,
But
but we just don't collaborate.
So does that mean two people assigned to one section, both annotate that section and then?
Independent.
Independent.
You can get an answer from Josh pretty quickly.
Well, I just think we should have a plan, so we don't have to decide outside of the meeting, right? So if we hear from Josh and he says. Teams of two is fine, then we can meet up and do it together or separately, I guess if those people prefer to work separately. But as a backup, we could just annotate those sections on our own and then bring them, together later.
Focus on the ones that I assigned to you.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
okay with that.
I like that.
Is it? Have we got a plan?
Yes.
I think so.
So what do? I circulate a
Word document.
Word document, and you already have the PDF. I'll send the Word document. And do I make a Google Doc? I'm anxious about that because
No.
I'm not sure that working.
No.
No, you can open a Word document as a Google Doc we can each do that.
Okay, yeah.
And then save it back as a Word
But
document.
all working on the same document is probably even worse than two people working on.
Oh, definitely, we can't do that. I don't think there's any question. I don't think we can all work on the same document. That seems like a violation of open meeting law.
Well, that'd be fun.
Oh, no.
It would be fun, but it's like, if we can't even email each other, I'm sure we can't all be editing one document.
I'm gonna itch us to
We want
closure.
it, we want it every day.
I really can find something that has nothing to do with the Andrews community forest, and just try it, and like, I'll work on it.
There we go.
But I will hope,
Menu for our Christmas. party.
I'll hope to get in touch with Josh, honestly, and let people know what,
You might be able to catch them right up.
I'd add
right.
one other little twist as we look at the overall flow too. Cause that's. That would change the, because like I say, everyone wants to know the objectives, I mean, not the objectives, the action step. And I would lean to putting that as close to the beginning as we can.
Oh, yeah. Alright,
if we can.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn. And we can keep talking.
I overrule.
Oh, you were saying to you.
Can I do that? Well, there are two things which are time sensitive. And one is the questions we send in for the Biofinder workshop. And the other is the annual report for the.
See you next
Good night. Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you.
The other one is our one pager for the town report, both of which are in the packet, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
I didn't.
I'll read over your
So-
one pager.
Are they both? Okay, no, the questions are not, the questions for Biofinder are not. Can I read them real quick? Here. But just looking at the agenda, definitely the report for the town, our page for the town report, that was in the packet, so I'm assuming everyone's read it and nobody's.
I have a couple
complaining about
comments,
it.
I'll send you some.
Okay, the questions for Biofinder, Number one, how to use Biofinder to obtain the map layers that are used in the New Hampshire Fish and Wildlife Guide for trail planning. And there are 5 of those, and one of them is sloped, so there's sort of a secondary question, a question that came from Sam, which is, actually, no, that was how to find ledges and how to determine the accuracy of data within the Biofinder. So these are sort of technical questions, I guess. And then the fourth question, which Sam raises, is can we contribute data to Biofinder? Because he thinks maybe there are some inaccuracies and can individuals submit new material. He says, I'm aware of a few vernal pools neighboring the Andrews Forest that could be added. I also noticed an invasive species layer in Biofinder that we could contribute to. So although I don't think those questions are controversial, is it?
No, yeah. And I was kind of imagining we'd get to see what comes up over there too.
And I guess the other thing about Biofinder is actually there are 4 of us who want to attend.
It's fine. I talked with Jeanette about it, and it doesn't sound like we're getting close with the cap, and we can also
Same with trails.
have UV trails, have NEB RCC, and then we're only using.
Oh, you dropped the.
Okay, so Chase and Sam will be attending.
Oh, you're lucky.
I'm sorry, I have to leave, the babysitter only is until
Yeah,
15.
yeah,
Okay.
So, bye, everybody.
That's the whole of that.
Thanks.
Questions?
Brad and I will be attending, so 4 of us are attending in January, and we'll
When is it, January 3rd?
I believe it's January 9th. Is the Biofinder training?
9th, I think.
I'm pretty sure it's the 9th.
Oh, okay, Brad has produced 4 more questions.
Yeah, you don't have to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know, I'd forgotten you wanted them in advance.
It's about conservation, layers in Biofinder which indicate conserved land. And
Could I confirm something? It is on January, it's January 9th at 7 PM. And if you sign up, you need to get your sign up to Judy on the RCC and give us your email so that we can send you a Zoom link. This is a Zoom training.
yeah,
I just want to reiterate also that you need to watch both of the attachments that Ian sent to you so that you understand where we're starting from, because this is considered level 2 training. Level 1 is on your own by watching the 2 videos that Ian will send you.
Yeah, so thanks, Jeanette, for reminding us, and and that's why I pushed this as time limited. We had to get this committee to at least be aware of it and agreement with those plans. And with our report to the town plan. That's because that's due by the end of this month or early January. So I think we could be ready for an adjournment if we've addressed all the things that have to be addressed today.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Actually.
Second is someone.
Items.
Yeah, we gotta go. Yeah, we can do, I'll second it.
No, you can't.
No, you actually can. I asked Josh before this, so I'll second it. All in favor to adjourn?
We should be aware that I think 3 individuals are up for renewal or replacement next year in 2025. And because of this very long process, well, it's a long process, so we have to get going on it in the new year, maybe not in January, but that'll be on January's agenda.
Okay, great.
Kind of get started on it.
Good. Great. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, Ian.
Yeah. Have a good time.